The Volvo C40 Recharge is a capable drive. The one in behind me here is the cloud blue metallic, and the paint choice is very subtle. You're going to find the C40 or the XC40 in 3 primary trim levels. It's either going to be the Core, the Plus, or the Ultimate that has all of the available features. When you look at the price in the vehicle in Canada, you're starting a little over $63,000 versus $54,000 down in the States, and that's before you look at federal incentives. So Canada, we still do have the IZEV incentive for up to $5,000, depending on how long you have the vehicle leased or financed for. You're going to find the XC40 either rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. So it's either going to be a single motor rear or dual motor for the front as well. I do prefer the dual motor, the all-wheel drive, for a few key reasons. I'm in Canada, and we get snow for 3 to 5 months out of the year. So if you're in northern states, if you're in Canada, somewhere where you're going to get snow, you definitely want to make sure you go all-wheel drive, because getting this in rear-wheel drive would be ridiculous. You're looking at spinning out like crazy. You're not going to have good traction by any stretch. So if you live in northern states or in Canada, do yourself a solid, get the all-wheel drive version. It's more powerful at the same time as well, and it doesn't really affect the range too much going that all-wheel drive route. You're going to find either 19s or 20-inch wheels inside the vehicle, because this is the ultimate trim. We're looking at a 20-inch wheel with that Volvo badge right in the very middle. Groovy, baby. Charging for the C40 and the XC40 are done just along the driver's side. It's got support for level 1, level 2, and level 3 DC supercharging, with the overall charge times varying just depending on the total draw, so the power draw. Because at home, I don't have a level 2 charger, so I'm strictly looking at level 1. Level 1 charging, you're like 80 plus hours, and that's going off of a 10-volt draw. But one of the cool things is that the C40, the XC40 do come with a 20-foot level 1 charge cable, which is useful. And one of the amazing things about that charge cable from the factory is that it also is water resistant, so full weather resistant. It's IP67 rated. So if it's raining outside, you can still keep that plugged in order to trickle charge yourself that way if you'd like to. Level 2 charging, you're going to range anywhere between 8 hours on the low end and 12 hours on the high end, depending on where you're getting your level 2 charge from. Because there's a charging station by my gym, but it's maxed out every time I've used it at about 5.8 kilowatts. So with the vehicle, the battery this size, so it's either a 78 or an 82 kilowatt available power, 82 in the rear wheel, 78 in the all wheel. So let's say 82 kilowatt at a 6 kilowatt draw, you're going to be 12 to 14 hours to charge up. So that's something you have to take into consideration. Maximum range is going to be the rear wheel drive variety, so 478 kilometers or 273 miles, which is pretty good. But if you're only driving 10, 20, 30 kilometers a day, you could realistically just get away with trickle charging at home if you needed to. But if you're driving like 100, 150 kilometers a day or 100 miles per day, a level 2 charge station at home would probably make sense, unless there's somewhere that you can plug in at work instead. I do like the overall style of the C40. Way better than the XC40 in my opinion because of that back end. You don't have as much space inside of the second row, but I prefer that sloped back versus the boxier wagon style instead that you'll find in the XC40. But that comes down to a matter of personal preference. Underneath the hood of the C40, you're going to find not much, and that's because this is the Recharge, so the electric version. But the C40 and the XC40 also have the option for a mild hybrid. So it's a 2-liter turbocharged engine, mild hybrid setup. If you want a walkthrough video on that version, you'll find it down in the description. But with the electric, there's not much. Easy access to top up your wiper fluid. And outside of that, there's also a tiny little Frunk in functional space as well. I'm using it right now for the charge cable. I just love that there's a level 1 charger right from the factory, because if you're only traveling a few kilometers or miles per day, you can just plug in at home. Really useful. It's a 20-foot cable. And when you look at it, you've either got an 82 kilowatt hour usable battery or a 78 instead. Rear wheel drive is 82, all wheel drive is 78. And how that translates to power inside the vehicle in the rear-wheel drive version is 248 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, which is really, really good. But when you get into that all-wheel drive version, 402 horsepower and 494 pound-feet of torque. The thing is an absolute beast, especially when you get into that performance unlocked mode. Volvo claims that the C40, the XC40 are going to be able to go from rear-wheel drive 0 to 100 kilometers an hour or 0 to 60 in 7.1 seconds. So it's a little long. When you get the all-wheel drive dual motor setup, it cuts in almost in half. But let's at least test the theory of the 7.1 seconds in 3, 2, and 100. That's pretty close. I would say that's pretty dang close. It was pretty much right at 7 seconds there. Not bad. I like the styling of the front end of the C40. Since this is the ultimate trim level, there are pixel LED headlamps. You'll have LEDs regardless, but these lit up at night look really good. There are some fog lamps down below that have a nice gloss highlight throughout them. And then even as you get to the front end where the traditional grille would be, there's a nice highlight. That Volvo badge there just pops, but there's a good glossy highlight right underneath that as well. It just adds to the overall aesthetics. And because this is one of the higher trims, you've also got that front-facing camera. So the front-facing camera, side-mounted cameras, and backup camera for a really sharp-looking 360 view. And one really cool thing about the Volvo 360 camera is that you can even look to see what's going on individually on the left or the right side. So if you're going off-road with it, you can see what's going on along your side there, but it's also useful if you're in tight spaces as well. And then outside of that, there is the option for the forward sensing system, which this one has. So just a lot of good safety features all around. The lamps inside of the C40 look great. There's a tiny little deck lid spoiler as well. You can see the other one right along the very top. All of your basic badges, including the Recharge badge along the right-hand side. Regardless of the trim level that you've got, you're always going to get the reverse sensing system. So that technology will always be there along with the backup camera. Getting into the trunk of this thing can be done a few different ways. There's a button just to the left-hand side of the steering wheel. You can utilize the key fob. And then just above the license plate in the very middle, there's also a release there that you can push in order to raise up the lift gate instead. So lots of ways to get in the trunk. Now this is a little cargo protector that you can use if you need it. I'm not too crazy about the idea of cargo protectors, but I mean, if you've got some valuables in the back, you can block it off if you wanted to. There's also this mat, which is kind of neat. So that's available there as well. Fold it flat if you're going to be sleeping inside this vehicle. But one thing that I really like about Volvo vehicles, when I was in the XC40 last week, I noticed that the little storage tray in the back here, you can fold it up in order to be able to place grocery bags there. Very forward thinking on Volvo's part. Now there's one thing, there's a jack stand that's included here, but there's no mini spare tire. So if you ever pop a tire, puncture a tire, need it changed out, whatever the case may be, or even if the batteries died, you do also have access to Volvo Roadside Assistance, and that's good for the same 4-year, 80,000 kilometer, 50,000 mile for the basic and powertrain warranty, which is useful. But feature-wise back here, there's not too much. Nothing off to the right or the left-hand side other than little speakers along the top. And then folding down the second row seats is also fairly straightforward. So along the left-hand side, there's a button that you can push on the top to fold down. Same story along the right-hand side. In order to fold down it is a very flat fold. And the cargo measurements that you're looking at are going from right where the lift gate would close to just in behind the armrest between the first row seats. So if the driver's seat, passenger seat were forwards, backwards a little bit, you gain or lose a little bit of extra space. On top of that, there's also this tiny little tray. So you can drop that down in order to get into the second row. Now, this is the C40, which means that you don't have as much trunk space, specifically in the height area, as you would in the XC40. So if you need a little bit more cargo space, and if you like the look of a wagon, the XC40 might be the one for you. On top of that, you can easily fold down the seats inside of the second row if you need to, Same idea, just pull that lever in order to make it happen. The side view mirrors inside of the C40 and the XC40 feature turn signals. You saw there, they're also power folding. They've got the blind spot monitoring system, and then when you're in reverse, they can also tilt down. As long as you've got the fob on you, so you can push there to lock the door. Intelligent access lets you slide your hand in order to unlock. But along the door, there's this interesting little cutout, and this features ambient light, so it's going to light up nicely at nighttime. There's also upgraded audio system, so this is the Harman Kardon sound system, which sounds great. There's driver's seat memory. So once you've got the driver's seat set up the way that you'd like to, push the M button and then either 1 or 2 for it to remember your own personal profile. Series of different buttons there, so unlock, lock, control your side view mirrors with your window controls, and then you can also either control the windows and the doors for the back seat if you want to, so you can lock them out. Push there in order to do that. Right here, interesting design choice on Volvo's part. Some carpeted liner there. Recharge badge along the side there. And the seat, interesting material there, but it's also going to be power adjustable, so you can adjust the backrest there. So lumbar support 4-way. You can also go backwards, forwards, up and down with it. And then you can also move that actual backrest backwards or forwards. Something interesting about the cushion there, but I'll point that out in a second. You've got the trunk release, so you can just do a push and hold in order to open it up. There's a nice glossy highlight inside of that vent. But, ooh, oh, that's nice. Yeah, so the highlight here, interesting. So there's a little handle you can grab, and when you do, you could slide the cushion out a little bit. Really interesting choice there, but if you wanted to really make the seat more comfortable for you, you've got that available as an option. But space-wise inside the vehicle, so I'm 6 feet tall, and with the driver's seat set up as low as it's going to go, I've got, depending on how you sit, 4.5, 5-ish inches of headspace. Because if you shift over to the side as you drive, might be able to get like 3 inches of headspace there, but if you shift over to the right a little bit, you've got even more because of this sunroof. But it's locked in place, so it's like a fixed panel glass, but still really nice. Volvo badge in the very middle there looks great. In order to start up, it is such a bizarre process. So there's one thing that threw me off. There's no push button start there. And in order to actually start up, you can maybe just kind of make it out in the cluster screen there. There you go. So you have to brake, and then you have to shift to reverse or drive in order to start. So just foot on the brake, and then you go either reverse or drive in order to turn the car on. Such an odd choice on Volvo's part to do that. It's the downside of doing it this way is that if you want to hop out of the vehicle, you throw it into park and you open up the driver's door, the car shuts off. So there's no way to keep it running. It is such an odd choice on Volvo's part to do that. I don't know why it's not so you can just keep it turned on, but here nor there. There's obviously a reason why they did it. I don't know what it is. But the XC40, the C40, etc. do have the option for the adaptive cruise control system. On top of that, there are some basic buttons to navigate through the cluster screen, and you can see there, features a full mapping cluster, which looks amazing. It's based off of Google Maps because the infotainment system inside the vehicle is Android-based, which is amazing. But one other little downside to that is that, yes, it's Android-based, but you've only got support for Apple CarPlay. So there's no Android Auto support inside of that screen. Très bizarre, but at the same time, you could still hook over Bluetooth if you want to for either device. So you hook up for phone calls and for audio that way if you want to. And then other than that, this would work the exact same way as a traditional Android device would work. So you've got a ton of different options for apps, for audio. There's even the option for Angry Birds inside this vehicle. You can only do certain things like play games when the car is actually stopped, but still, that's a pretty neat feature at the same time. But if you want a full walkthrough, like you want to know how to use the steering wheel buttons, go through the cluster screen or the infotainment system, you'll find a walkthrough down in the description of this video. But I mean, this is kind of neat to be able to do this while you're stopped. I mean, that's kind of neat. Ridiculous. But if you wanted to keep yourself entertained, that is available as an option. Now, on top of that, there are like I said, so many different options inside the screen. Yeah, you've got Angry Birds, Open Radio. Like Open Radio is something that's added afterwards. Like there are certain apps. So it's not going to come with Waze or Angry Birds installed, but there's the Google Play Store, and that gives you the flexibility to download a ton of different apps inside the vehicle. So the vehicle itself standard has support for Bluetooth media, Sirius XM, regular radio, so strictly FM, and then YouTube as well. And that's full on YouTube. So you can actually watch videos through this screen. Same thing, only when you're parked. But you can search for different channels very easily. Let's search for, have to do this. There we go. So you can watch full YouTube videos right inside of the screen here if you want to. This is a really useful one, even though the C40, well, the Recharge, I guess I should say, doesn't feature paddle shifters or a manual mode. If you have a car that does have paddle shifters, manual mode, column shifter, etc., this is a really useful video to watch. But you've got full video playback inside inside the screen, full screen capabilities there as well, and all the same YouTube flexibilities. So you've got closed captions that are available there as well. You can speed it up if you'd like to. It's pretty wild. Now, like I said, it doesn't work the second you put it into drive or reverse, etc. It's going to turn it off. And that's the same way for a few other apps, but you could download other apps. So the screen itself doesn't actually, the vehicle, I should say, doesn't have support for USB sticks standard. And even then, it's only got support for USB Type-C. So I have this little adapter. It goes from USB Type-A to USB Type-C. And then in order to listen to Bluetooth, or I should say USB music, download Audio Wagon. And that one lets you listen to, there we go, well, doesn't matter there. Oh, be good. Yes, agree. You can see all of your tracks, albums, things like that. So before I play audio, the C40 and the XC40 have two different speaker choices that are available. So it's either going to be a base 9-speaker system, and then there's an upgraded 13-speaker Harman Kardon audio system. This is the Harman Kardon, and it sounds so good. So good. Okay, so the audio that we're going to listen to is just coming right out of the microphone, so there's no post-processing done whatsoever. Nice and relaxing. So let's go for a little bit more of like a rock type of a song instead, rock rap. So same idea, just out of the microphone here. Tell me how to live life in these times. It feels like nobody's right. Yeah. So I'ma figure out what else we succeed and then invest all of my time. The audio inside of this system is so good. It does help that the C40 and the XC40, they're smaller vehicles. So the audio quality is just really, really solid inside this vehicle. I love it. And then there was one other thing, the radio here, it only supports FM standard from the factory. So there's no AM radio, but if you download Open Radio, Bueller, there we go. So if you download Open Radio, that gives you the flexibility of being able to do things like hop into your country, and then loading content. That's going to let you listen to pretty much essentially every available station. It's amazing. So AM, FM, etc. So really, really useful. So there's the station that you'd prefer to listen to on the FM side of things. You'd have the flexibility to search for it there as well. Yeah, like I said, I could talk about this screen for such a long time because there are so many cool features like this 360 camera where you can see what's going on beside you, behind you, etc. But as I said, full walkthrough, you'll find it down in the description. You've got some basic controls down here. There's a 12-volt power point, 2 USB Type-C ports, along with a wireless charge pad. There's a tiny little phone storage tray, maybe? Yeah. A few cup holders, and then the shifter with your traditional park, reverse, neutral, drive as well. And the shifter actually does feel pretty good in the hand. Now, on top of that, there's this tiny little storage tray, so oddly placed. So oddly placed. So you can't get back to it. You can't get to it from the back there. So if you drop anything in there, you're reaching in order to get it. Now, you know where there. The armrest there does have a good amount of space, though, as well. Like I'm a little bit more than a wrist deep. No power points on the inside, though. This little trim Also does feature ambient light, and again, looks great at night. Decent amount of storage space in there. And then you've got a Harman Kardon sound speaker up there, and then a few up there as well. You're going to find an auto-dimming rear view mirror along with your HomeLink system. So if you've got a garage door opener at home, you can easily program that in. There's a SOS mode, and then you can call for help with basic controls for your cabin lights on top of that. The visor inside of the vehicle does have a little ticket receipt holder. Vanity mirror has lights built in, and then this thing, unfortunately, does not stretch out. But I mean, that's going to block the majority of the sun that's hitting your face. There's also a little holy crap handle along the driver and the passenger side. And then, yeah, like I said, there's also that fixed glass roof, which opens things up nicely. One downside is that on very bright days, it can get a little bit blinding on the inside here. So if you're not too crazy about the fixed glass there, what I'd actually recommend is just going for maximum tint. You could probably maybe even go like a 40-50% tint. Then it would just block things out really nicely and still give you that openness feeling at the same time. So something to consider there. But got to... Okay, so driver's seat is set up the way that I traditionally drive. And before I hop back there, one other thing to point out is that on the dash, there's also this little guy. So there's a little ticket receipt holder. So if you've paid for our parking receipt holder, I should say. So if you've paid for parking, you can easily just drop it in there. Kind of neat. But top back, yeah, see, look at that. Car turned off automatically. Odd feature. For sure. That's one thing that I would like to see changed, is that there should be the flexibility of keeping the car turned on when you get out. But the door here, same basic features. There's a speaker, basic window controls and lock. And then there's also that little storage, speaker down low. And then there's also a little cup holder storage along the side. Ooh, hopping inside. With the driver's seat set up for myself being 6 feet tall, inside of the second row, I've got a good amount of knee space, a good amount of foot space. And up overhead, inside of the C40, it's a little bit tight. So my hair is like scraping across the top, and that's just because this is the C40. So the downside of the C40 is it slopes a little bit sooner than the XC40 instead. So if you wanted more headspace inside of the Volvo vehicle, you'd have to go for the XC40 instead of the regular C40. I like the style of this better, but the one downside of the C40 is trying to see out that back window. It is so challenging to actually see out there, just because of how small it is. Volvo could definitely solve that issue by essentially going through, actually, what would be the way to do it? Digital rear view mirror, maybe? That would be the only thing that I can think of. But like I said, it's still fairly comfortable inside of the back row here. Yeah, good space. You're going to find little mesh pockets behind both the driver and the passenger side. There's also a few vent controls back there, and then USB Type-C ports, and then heated seat buttons. So that's not standard, the heated seat buttons, but it's strictly for the outboard seat. So a driver passenger side. The middle seat is never going to be heated. You've got the anchor points there, top tether points behind the seats, and then you've also got some cup holders back there. That's useful. On top of that, there's also this, which we can't open up from the inside here, but if it was down in the trunk area, you'd actually be able to pass through. Well, you can't pass through to the trunk, but you could reach things that are in the trunk of the vehicle. Interesting design choice for sure. Outside of that, you're going to find a little clothing hook with a light, and that's the same for the driver's side there as well. And you can see there, so all you do, just essentially insert your clothing hook, twist in order to lock it into place there. But outside of that, it's simple back here. But this is the rear-wheel drive version of the vehicle, so not quite as powerful as the all-wheel drive, but still it's a lot of fun. So let's go for a quick spin and see how it handles. Volvo! The handling in this car is so good. Oh, it's so good. I love it. And this is rear-wheel drive. Like, I could only imagine how amazing the all-wheel drive version would be in comparison. And one thing that I will say is that having the fixed glass roof is nice, but It also kind of can drive you crazy a little bit, like bright days like today. The sun is kind of glaring down and hitting the one side of my face there. So that's something to consider, that obviously with this fixed glass roof, there's no shade or anything like that for you to close off. It's the unfortunate part. But there's a simple fix, and that's just getting it tinted instead. One thing that I've really come to appreciate inside of the C40, the Recharge, and it'll be the same for the XC40, it's interesting. So it doesn't have paddle shifters for you to be able to adjust the level of regenerative braking, but through the infotainment system, you can choose to go either for like a one pedal drive, you can have it off, you can have it on, or you can have it in an auto mode instead. I really, really like the auto mode, because sometimes with the one pedal drive, you take your foot off the brake, you just want to kind of coast a little bit. The way that Volvo's done it, I didn't like it at first, but spending more time with it, I really like the way that it works, because it's a nice gradual slowdown instead. Like, it's regenerative braking, but it's like I'm using the adaptive cruise system, but I'm not using the adaptive cruise system right now. You can still use that on regular streets like this, like residential streets, but the one pedal drive inside of Volvo, it's just done so differently from what I'm used to in other cars. Because in the auto mode, you take your foot off the accelerator. If there's no traffic, you're just gradually going to coast. But if there's a lot of traffic, like I'm looking at traffic right now as well, you take your foot off the brake and it almost works the same way as adaptive cruise control would work. So even without the adaptive cruise system on, it slows you down gradually instead. It is a really, really cool system. All right, and 0 to 70 test in 3, 2, and... I love it so much. That's one thing about electrics. You are leaving almost everybody in the dust. I say almost because obviously if a car has more torque, it's going to be able to pull forward before you, but for the most part, you're getting in front of everybody at a red light. The downside of doing that, though, is that if you've got a little bit of a lead foot and you're constantly gunning it, you use up way more of your range in comparison. So it's the downside of having a lead foot, but I mean, at the same time, it's so fun. It's so fun to do it. The cabin inside of the C40 is surprisingly quiet as well. I guess there's a little bit of road noise, sure, but there's not so much road noise that you just wouldn't be able to handle it. Not bad. I've been driving the C40 Recharge now for about a week, and I gotta say, it is a pretty nice ride. There are some small details that I'm not crazy about. I don't like how it doesn't actually have Android Auto on it. I don't like how natively it doesn't have support for AM or USB music. You can easily add it in, so it like loses half a point, maybe because of that. But the performance is pretty good. The range inside of the vehicle is pretty great at the same time. The handling is amazing. The seats are comfortable. So the XC40 Recharge, or the C40 Recharge, I should say, does have a lot of things going for it. And that was a look at the Volvo C40 Recharge. You can find all the build details for this specific Volvo down in the description, along with links off to Volvo Canada and USA if you're hoping to put through an order for one of these yourself. But if you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone if you think they might find it helpful, and until I see you next time, take care.